There comes a moment in history when silence becomes impossible, when injustice grows so heavy that it crushes even the strongest shoulders, and when ordinary people decide that they can no longer live one more day under the weight of oppression. The story of the civil rights movement in America is not just the story of laws, leaders, or speeches. It is the story of a nation struggling to face its own reflection. It is the story of men, women, and even children who refused to give up their dignity, even when the world around them tried to deny their humanity. And it is the story of how courage, sacrifice, unity, and unbreakable resolve reshaped the destiny of an entire country. To understand the civil rights movement, we must begin by understanding the world before it, a world still scarred by the deep wounds of slavery, wounds that did not fade even after emancipation. The end of slavery did not mean the beginning of freedom. For millions of African Americans, the chains were removed from their wrists only to be placed invisibly on their homes, their schools, their jobs, and their very right to live as equal citizens. Segregation became the new weapon of control. Jim Crow laws spread across the South like a dark shadow, forcing Black Americans into separate schools, separate restaurants, separate buses, separate neighborhoods, and separate systems of justice. A line was drawn, visible everywhere, enforced brutally, and accepted by the society of the time. Into this world, the civil rights movement was born, not in conference rooms or political discussions, but in the hearts of people who had reached their breaking point. People who were tired of waiting, people who were tired of hearing the word later. People who knew that equality delayed was equality denied. One of the sparks that ignited the movement came from a seamstress in Montgomery, Alabama. A woman whose quiet strength would echo louder than any shout. Her name was Rosa Parks. On December 1st, 1955, after a long day of work, she boarded a bus and sat in the section designated for Black passengers. When the bus driver demanded she give up her seat to a white passenger, she simply said, "No." It was a small word, but it became the beginning of a revolution. Her arrest triggered the Montgomery bus boycott, a 381-day protest that brought a city to its knees and introduced America to a young preacher named Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose voice would soon shake the world. But the civil rights movement was never just one person or one moment. It was thousands of small acts of bravery woven together like a tapestry. Every march, every prayer meeting, every sit-in, every protest, every courtroom battle, and every sacrifice became a thread in a larger struggle for freedom. The movement demanded patience, discipline, and above all, courage. Courage to stand up even when standing up meant risking everything. Courage to walk into a crowd of hatred and still hold on to nonviolence. Courage to believe in change even when change seemed impossible. Dr. King believed in a weapon more powerful than any gun, the power of peaceful resistance. Inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, he believed that violence only strengthens the hand of the oppressor, while nonviolence exposes the truth of injustice. King's philosophy became the heartbeat of the movement, but nonviolence required strength most people cannot imagine. It meant standing unarmed in front of men with clubs, dogs, fire hoses, and guns. It meant sitting calmly while mobs spat, screamed, punched, and threatened. It meant believing that love was stronger than hate, even when hate surrounded you on all sides. As the movement grew, so did the resistance. Those who wanted to maintain segregation fought back harder. Peaceful protesters were beaten, arrested, and sometimes killed. Churches were bombed, homes were attacked. Innocent people were targeted because they dared to ask for the rights promised in the Constitution. And yet the movement continued, not weakened by the violence, but strengthened by it. Every act of brutality made it clearer to the world that the fight for civil rights was not a political argument. It was a moral one, a struggle for basic humanity. One of the most defining battles of the movement took place not on the streets, but in the classroom. For decades, schools in the United States were divided. White schools receiving better funding, better teachers, better opportunities, while Black children were forced into overcrowded, under-resourced buildings. This inequality was challenged in the landmark Supreme Court case Brown versus Board of Education, which declared that separate but equal was not equal at all. The ruling shook the foundations of segregation, but enforcing it was another battle entirely. In Little Rock, Arkansas, 9 black students attempted to attend a previously all-white high school. Their courage was met with a mob of hundreds screaming threats, refusing to let them enter. It took federal troops to escort them safely. The image of soldiers walking children to school became one of the most powerful symbols of the era. Proof that change required more than laws. It required moral courage at every level of society. Meanwhile, the movement continued to grow in momentum through the power of unity. Sit-ins at segregated lunch counters spread across the country. Students sat peacefully while being insulted, beaten, and dragged away. Freedom riders boarded interstate buses and traveled through the South to challenge segregation, risking death with every mile. Many were attacked by mobs. Buses were burned, riders were jailed. But their bravery exposed the violence at the core of segregation and forced the federal government to respond. The turning point came in 1963 during the March on Washington. On that day, over 250,000 people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial, standing shoulder to shoulder under the hot August sun. They came from different races, different states, different religions, but they came united by one dream. Dr. King stepped up to the podium and delivered a speech that would echo for generations. His words were not just a call to America, they were a call to humanity. "I have a dream," he said, "that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed." Those words became a beacon of hope, a promise of what America could be. Despite the progress, the struggle was far from over. The following year, 1964, became a year of tragedy and triumph. The Civil Rights Act was passed, outlawing discrimination in public places. It was a monumental victory, but victories in law did not erase hatred in hearts. Violence continued. Murders continued. Segregation continued in many places through intimidation and fear. One of the darkest moments came in 1965 during the march from Selma to Montgomery. When peaceful marchers attempted to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge, they were met with state troopers who attacked them with clubs, whips, and tear gas. The brutality of Bloody Sunday shocked the nation and the world. Images of innocent people being beaten on the bridge forced America to confront a truth it could no longer deny. This moment pushed the country toward another historic law, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. For the first time, African Americans in the South were protected in their right to vote without fear, intimidation, literacy tests, or impossible obstacles. It was a major step forward, but the price paid for this progress was enormous. Many activists were jailed, beaten, or killed. Among the names remembered are Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, and Dr. King himself, leaders who paid the ultimate price for equality. The movement did not end with King's assassination. It continued through communities, organizations, and ordinary citizens determined to carry the torch forward. The civil rights movement had changed America forever, but the struggle for equality would continue long after the laws were passed. Racism, discrimination, and injustice did not disappear, but the movement had planted seeds of hope, seeds that would grow into future fights for justice, not just for African Americans, but for all marginalized communities. The civil rights movement was not a perfect story. It was a painful story, a story of suffering and sacrifice, of courage and conflict, of unimaginable hardship and unbreakable spirit. But above all, it was the story of a people who refused to give up their humanity, a people who fought not just for themselves but for the soul of a nation, a people who believed that freedom was not a privilege, it was a right.